Welcome to the perspective. I have a good friend of mine, Bryan Burns, with us today. So if you don't know Bryan, I met Bryan several years ago in the wrestling room. My son started to wrestle, and we were looking for a how do you say it, a higher level wrestling room. And one of my other friends, a mutual friend of Bryan and I's, Jesse, introduced me to Bryan, and that's how I got to know Bryan. For those of you in the wrestling community that may be watching, you're probably very familiar with Bryan. I was not as familiar in Virginia, but Bryan's been around Virginia wrestling for a long time. But Bryan, welcome. I appreciate you coming on.
Thanks for having me.
Yeah, so tell everybody.
I got nothing to promote. I'm just here.
He's like, I'm just promoting Patrick. I just need to help Patrick.
I just want to help Patrick.
I volunteered.
Yeah, exactly right.
But
also I would say it's been great to have you. You know, like it's hard to do this without somebody, right? Without a partner in crime. So, you know, it's been really cool to have you kind of work, you know, to kind of commiserate with things and share things.
Commiserate for sure.
And enjoy experiences and everything we do. We're together at least four nights a week at least.
And then right? When you add weekends,
6, right? So 6 nights. I think I spend more time with you than my wife.
I'm pretty sure your wife makes comments when we talk on the phone outside of the time we spend in real person, like my wife does. My wife literally took my phone one night and programmed you into my phone as best friend, Bestie Bryan. Was how it was listed in my phone. Yeah. Like you called in the next time, I'm like, why the hell does this say Bestie Bryan? And my wife starts laughing. I'm like, oh, you think that's funny? Right. She's like, well, I mean, you guys talk all the time.
We do.
Yeah, and I think some of...
And now we're doing podcasts during the day.
Just more talking.
Yeah.
There's a theme around Patrick, if you haven't figured this out. I talk a lot. The Irish in me comes out.
I think I got Irish in me too. Burns.
Did you?
Scotch Irish.
So I know, like, we haven't even like gotten into your background, but I'm dying to know. Have you like put yourself on the list and gone like 23andMe and done any of the swab stuff?
No, I haven't.
Are you like afraid?
I would like to do that.
Okay.
Yeah. Also, just to kind of know like if there's any predisposition towards like bad things that might happen. That's mostly.
So health would be for you like the only reason that you would do it?
Yeah, I'm not really. I mean, you know, genie out, like all that stuff would be kind of cool too, just to see like, okay, maybe there's a little Native American Indian in me or something. So I kind of feel like there might be.
Have you ever thought like, oh, I'm going to be on a list? Like, does that bother you at all? Like some people are like, I'm not doing like a 23andMe because like that's a DNA government list or whatever, you know, like they say all that stuff.
I'm not, well, but you're right. Now I've got to think about this, right? It's because you could be onto something there.
Like some people say like.
Also like health insurance companies sometimes like, you know, screening and stuff like that. Like if you put yourself out there, does that now put you on that list? Okay, like don't give that guy a chance, right. I
mean, they that's what they've literally said. Like I know in some states, not to totally derail, but like I think Arizona was one of the first states to like go to like the whole legalization of marijuana, right? So I know that in that state in particular, when you go to get your card, right? I don't even think it's medical. I could be totally wrong. For those of you listening, feel free to in the comments correct me. But I'm pretty sure you have to sign a waiver like giving up your rights to firearms. Like it's like you sign literally your right away to like to partake in this thing. So like all of these things exist.
And they probably think they're also like because you're giving your blood, right? So what else are they doing?
Right.
Like, you know.
Like I think it gets
Do
really.
they know that you're taking like THC or
the 23andMe thing? I think is a swab.
Oh, it's a swab.
I think they send you a kit. I could be wrong, but I think they swab you, like Q-tip it, you put it in a tube, and then it goes to like. Who knows? Like, I don't know where it goes.
Just, I think yesterday or the day before, I was watching a podcast on prostate cancer and having pre-tested for like your history or your DNA or that can kind of predict whether or not you're highly, you know,
no kidding,
prostate cancer. But
so they have like markers.
But we all get prostate cancer. It's like the number one cause of
Yeah, it's like
type
not
of cancer.
if, it's like
Yeah.
when.
Yeah, it's
Like
like
how
when,
old are you
right.
going to be when
Right.
you
Right.
get this?
Yeah.
Yeah. Do you go and get your yearly?
My father passed away from prostate cancer. Right?
Really? So that was literally
something I want to pay attention to in my life, right?
So then you'd obviously have that most likely genetic
You would
predisposition
think,
to
right?
that.
Potentially, yeah.
So do you get
But
your?
it seems like there's not a lot of new discoveries around how to treat prostate cancer. It's just kind of, at least at this point, maybe AI will kick in and solve the problem for us.
I had a friend that just went through it, only in his early 50s and went through it.
Yeah.
And his PSA was through the roof.
Yeah.
Through the roof.
I guess maybe that's the one thing that's changed in the past several years is like they're not doing
the invasive
thing anymore.
finger in your
PSA,
yeah.
they're just doing the PSA levels, right?
Yeah.
So if you're 1 or 2 or 3, or whatever, you're
Yeah,
okay.
I think is it greater than 5? I want to say the PSA is if
that
you're
seems like a
greater
high
than
number.
in 5.
And as you get older, the acceptable number kind of goes up over time.
Yeah, I get mine pulled every twice a year, I think. Mine gets checked. It's like a 0.5.
It's something I heard around like if you're taking testosterone as a supplement.
Yeah, I don't know any guy in this room who yeah.
No.
Yeah.
I mean, I don't know why I brought that
No,
up.
because I'm on TRT. That's why, and I'm on TRT, which is exactly why you brought it up. For those of you watching
So
now,
I was concerned about.
Thinking
about you.
So I don't know that it's necessarily an increased marker for prostate cancer. I actually don't. I don't know if that's a side effect, honestly, or not. What I can tell you is that with my urologist, where I get my replacement therapy from, I get my labs pulled like at a minimum every 6 weeks. Sometimes it's monthly. It just depends on kind of where we are with my numbers. And the PSA is a normal test that gets run with that, in addition to all the other general metabolic panels. So it's kind of interesting when you get your lab work pulled that frequently to kind of see how your body reacts, and you can tell. Like I can tell by certain markers, like even because I've done it for so long now, like time of day that I had my labs pulled. Like I can tell if I did it in the morning, I can tell if I did it in the afternoon, I can tell if I did it in the evening. Like it's kind of crazy when you look at certain markers. But yeah, prostate cancer is definitely, I'd say, on the rise. And I don't know if that's because of the PSA test. Like I don't know if that's like we have an early marker, so all of a sudden, bang! Now you kind of
I mean, I think initially when they started doing the PSA testing, there was a large number of people that kind of have prostate cancer as a result of the testing. But I think that was because the testing was new, right? And now as it's kind of like leveling out, it's sort of kind of coming down to a baseline. But
So I want to get into some of you. So take me through like where you grew up. Obviously, everyone who's watching knows you're in the wrestling community. But take me through like a little bit of your childhood. I know you grew up in Pennsylvania, but tell me a little bit about like where you grew up, your background, etc.
Yeah, so I grew up kind of in a rural community, Danville, Pennsylvania, on a farm. Yeah, and I was on a hill, and it was me and my neighbor and my dog. I think at one point I had like 12 pets.
Grow up on a farm,
So
right?
Yeah, like I had, you name it.
I want to know the craziest pet. What's the craziest pet that you owned?
I would catch snakes, like black snakes.
You were that guy.
I would catch mice. Like I was a farm kid. It's like, what do you do on your own? Like I would walk the woods with my dog and my shotgun or my 22. And
if you found it, you caught it.
And I would, that's kind of how I grew up. And my father it was a unique circumstance because we're in a small community in Danville, Pennsylvania, which is home to Geisinger Hospital.
Okay.
Right? And so there's many physicians in the community. So there's I would say a highly educated population in this small rural community, which is kind of unique. The combination of like educated people in the country kind of living together. My neighbor was also a physician, and he had 3 kids, and so we were friends. But also, that area is surrounded by the coal region in Pennsylvania, right? And so there's a lot of like tough kids, like blue collar kids, kind of, in that area, right? So it's a tough area from a wrestling perspective. It's like you go to the barber and just memories. It's like everybody's interested. Like, what weight are you wrestling this year? What do you how
And
you
they know
doing?
every kid.
I saw your match, and they're always talking about it. It's just part of the culture.
Did the
in
town shut
Pennsylvania.
down for like high school wrestling? Like, did the town like shut down on everyone?
It was something. It was something you did on a Friday night.
Okay.
Right. It's like when you, as a high school kid, even in junior high school, the thing to do with your buddies was to go to the high school match.
Right.
And we had rivalries. Right? Shikellamy was a big rival of ours. So
Still hate them.
Over time you sort of get a little more perspective in life, and it's like, no, of course not. But I would say they were kind of scary. They were like they would come out to AC/DC and all those dark songs.
So they were
and stuff
super
like that.
intimidating.
It's like, it's like those guys are a little crazy,
I love it.
and scary, right? So but that was so my we're talking about wrestling, right? So I mean, how I grew up.
So your dad was a physician.
Interesting. So Marty McCary,
Okay.
who's been appointed by Trump
Yeah.
to chair the FDA, was in my math class, right? So
Small town.
small town, but
Small
like I
town
said,
Danville,
highly
PA.
there was an educated population kind of within the community.
Interesting.
Mark Weeder's father was a physician as well.
Interesting. So
Yeah.
all these guys from Little Danville.
The best man in my wedding and state champion wrestler, my workout partner, his father was the president of Geisinger.
of the hospital.
Of the hospital, right? So, kind of like a
Wow.
he was a state champ. He was prep school national champ. Went on to West Point. Blew out
Prep school. So he went to private school.
Yeah. Well, he went to Blair for a year.
Oh, so he went to Blair Academy.
He
He moved to Jersey.
So the thing to do back then,
Okay.
like if you wanted to get into West Point, was you would wrestle high school and then you do a prep school year at Blair. Now they moved the prep school to like on campus at Army. So like Sonati, for example, he's going.
Shout out to Evan Sonati, who's
Yeah.
committed to West Point.
He's going to do that prep school at Army, right, for a year.
So he'll do
But
that.
so
is that a
Chris-
red shirt year? Do you take your red shirt?
No,
and
it's
do the-
just like another year of high school. But it's kind of like red shirt.
So will he
like,
do that
it's
next
like,
year?
What?
So
No, he's a senior next year.
So
and then he'll have another year at
So
Army
it's
prep
like you
school.
basically take a year off.
Yeah, it's basically a year before your 4 years of eligibility start to count.
So then he
At
can
West
red shirt. So he can.
Yeah.
So you're saying you go to the prep school, you work
Yeah.
out with your RTC. I
Yeah.
would assume.
Yeah.
You're not red shirted.
Yeah.
And then you come in the following year, you red shirt potentially.
Yeah, I'm not sure how redshirting. If you can redshirt when you're in the military at like 4 years. I don't know, but I don't know.
Yeah, that's
I don't know. To
That's
be
a
honest
great
with you.
question. Like
Yeah.
if you can actually, I think you probably can. And here's
Yeah.
why I think maybe because Wyatt Hendrickson was at Air Force, right, in the
Yeah.
Big 12 for years, and he just went to Oklahoma State. So he's got to have a year of eligibility. Now I don't know if that counts because he was during that COVID. He's
Perhaps
like one of
he
those
could redshirt and then get his years back at a pub or public school.
Got
you know
it.
what I mean? But if
Got
you
it.
stay at West Point, I don't know. It's probably like 4 years.
Well,
and
I don't
out.
know how
Yeah.
you release from that. Like I think Hendrickson is a
I
unique
think
situation.
you can do 2 years. My understanding, you can do 2 years at an academy and then transfer out. But once you do like that third, this is.
Okay, like you're in the military at
Yeah.
that point. Like,
Yeah,
congratulations.
I think so.
Okay.
And I think you can transfer out with no, like, you don't have to pay them back, kind
Okay.
of thing. You don't owe anything. But, again,
Yeah,
not my.
a rabbit hole for another day. I get it. I get it.
yeah,
All right,
yeah.
so Danville,
Yeah.
high school wrestling.
Yeah.
Everyone is at this, like this hospital employs. I would assume a majority of like the uber professionals
Yeah, it was like
in the
that.
region.
We had some manufacturing, KVS, Merck.
Okay, Merck?
Yeah,
So
Merck was there as
pharmaceutical
well.
company?
Yeah, pharmaceutical company, just down the river there. You could see Merck plant from where I live. So and so from a wrestling, I was and Jimmy Martin came from Danville. So I think, Jimmy Martin was one of the names people know.
You should know. If you don't.
National champ, I think 3-time national champ. I think
believe.
one time he lost to Ricky Bonomo in the finals, maybe the first year, and then won the...
Also a Pennsylvania guy.
Yeah, also a Pennsylvania guy, and also the twin brother of my assistant coach at Bucknell.
So take me through high school. Like I really want to know. Like you go to Danville. So actually, let's back up. What year did you start wrestling? How old were you? Would you say?
I want to say second grade, and it was I would say early on. I was thinking about like I had kind of like a little whisper. You know how like you go through life, and it's like I think I might want to like lead a community program in some way, like when I'm older, like now. Right? Yeah. But and I think it's because I had a lot of respect for the people who did that. Like we would go to the high school at Danville, and we'd have basketball leagues, we had wrestling leagues. I would do both. I played football, did all the things that you do kind of growing up. And so those programs were really great feeder programs into, for the high school ultimately. But, I think we had a large population. We didn't have, the internet, right? And so we had these, I remember having dual team events, but it was like sort of like an informal competition between two youth programs, like maybe it was Bloomsburg versus Danville, and we'd kind of get together.
And these were just club.
Very informal, like dual team competitions, right? But then we had these AAU tournaments that we would go to.
Interesting.
And, Mifflinburg, all these tiny little communities, and they still have them to this day. You can look online now to Pennsylvania Youth Wrestling. Yep. It's the 50th annual, Biglerville, seasons beatings.
Still a hammer tournament. Right? Still a hammer tournament.
Yeah. Or, the Mifflinburg AAU
seasons
tournament.
Beatings.
Yeah. Right. So we would go to these events, and they would have, there would be around like cafeteria table, and they'd have all of the tournaments printed out for like the next couple weeks. And that was always something I would go like collect all the little papers. This is second grade through, pre-high school.
And you would just like circle the events that you wanted to go to.
Yeah, it's kind of like, hey mom, can I go to this one kind of thing.
Interesting.
Yeah, that was the cool thing to do.
Now,
right?
Growing up, was like your dad into wrestling?
Yeah, that's interesting, right? So I would say more my mom was well, I wouldn't say anybody was really into it.
Okay.
Right? I would say...
So, like, Dad didn't have a wrestling background?
No.
Okay.
Yeah. But they were supportive.
Right.
And I would always be like, hey, can we do this? Can we do that? And, my mom would be supportive of everything that I would do. And she would generally be the one to take me to these events. And my dad would go along, but he was also... busy at the hospital, he's a ICU doc, and for a long period of time.
Right.
Yeah.
Yeah, it's interesting. Sort of, I would say we have that similar background. Like my dad didn't have any background in wrestling. Parents were super supportive, but like my dad didn't have a clue. Like, okay, you want to wrestle? Great. Like,
yeah, my mom.
I know nothing.
My mom, to this day, she has all these papers kind of stored, right? And she would have all of my tournament brackets. She would write. There was nothing online like track wrestling, right? So it was like she would write everybody, the whole bracket.
My mom, same thing.
Right, like she wouldn't just say, okay, well, where are you wrestling? No, she would have like everything filled out for every wrestler, and she would track every score, and she would write them all down and fill the brackets.
My parents, same
And then
way.
the next weekend or whatever, she's like, "Oh, you're wrestling that guy."
Right, you wrestled him like 3 weeks ago, and I'm like, yeah, same exact thing. When I got married, my mom handed to my wife like all of my old stuff. I didn't even know my mom had it. It was just like, here you go, like newspaper clippings of articles that I was featured in, all that stuff. And my mom was just like to Danielle, here you go, like I'm passing this on to you. And I'm like, what the hell am I gonna do with this? Like, anyways.
Yeah, and it's like we've always at the Virginia Patriots program, we had this like small core group of kids that kind of go everywhere, and then some kids come in and out.
Right.
And we had the same kind of thing. So we had the Ackermans, the Walkers, you know, the Martins, you know, and we would all sort of kind of go to these events together. But
just core group of little hammers.
Yeah, just core group of little hammers. Yeah, I guess at the time. But, you know, so that didn't translate well for me into high school, though, because I was a late developer, right? So I was a 132-pound senior.
Okay.
And I was behind, you know, these elite guys on the team, right?
Well, hold on, back up. Like elementary, middle school.
Mm-hmm.
So at what point, like everyone kind of knows, like when did you turn the corner? Like when did you turn the corner, and would you say like I went from like an average wrestler to like, okay, like I can hold my own and I'm kind of a hammer? Like,
I would say college. Yeah, it didn't turn. I didn't turn the corner until college.
Okay, so middle school, did you wrestle? So, like, we all kind of know Virginia, like, forgive me, you guys are all going to get mad, and those who know me know how I really feel about this, but Virginia middle school wrestling is just kind of a joke. Like, let's call it what it is. Right. You're not really a hammer. Yeah. But Pennsylvania middle school wrestling, I'm assuming you had team wrestling for whatever public or private school you were in. Yeah. Was it good?
I would say the instruction was good. Okay. Where Coach Hefner and Coach Rank in the early days of youth wrestling, I think all that instruction was excellent, you know. And I think we didn't wrestle nearly as much as kids wrestle today, right? I mean, we're going to a weekend event and at Tyrant and wrestling 8 matches, you know, in a weekend, sometimes more, right? Yeah. But so yeah, the junior high events would be like a dual team competition, and you might get 1 match a week. You know, something like that.
So did you wrestle on your middle school team?
I wrestled in junior high.
Okay, and then...
It was junior high. We didn't call it middle school.
Yeah, fine. So you wrestled junior high, and then you went to high school. Mm-hmm. Take me through, like, so, like, your freshman year, you're like, I'm going to go out for wrestling. Did everyone make the team? Like at Danville, did everyone make the team, or did they have tryouts? Or
it was a small school,
so everyone made the team.
I would say everybody that kind of went out made it. I don't recall anybody getting cut, but it's a small room we had.
Small hammers. Small room hammers.
Small room. I went, so my freshman year, I don't have a great recollection of the first 3 years. I just know I didn't start. I wasn't on the starting. I wasn't in the starting lineup until my senior year. Okay. So all the way up through until my senior year, I was a workout partner for Chris and for, you know, Dave Martin and, you know, just some of the other guys that, you know, that were more elite. I mean, like I said, Chris was a state champ, AA, and Dave was a state qualifier, I think.
And then Pennsylvania, a little different than Virginia, too, because how many districts? So Pennsylvania has a ton of districts, right?
Yeah, there's all these little pockets, right? You got Philly, you got Pittsburgh, you got Bethlehem, Altoona, you got kind of the central Pennsylvania State College area where, you know, where we are, up in Danville, and surrounding communities up there. So, yeah, there's lots of little pockets of greatness throughout the state, yeah. But, yeah, I mean, you know, so I think I was thinking about this last night. It was like, if only to see yourself through the eyes of another, right? If I could only go back and see myself then, but I have to imagine that if I were my coach in high school, you know how like when you stop yelling or trying to support someone or giving someone criticism and you're sort of quiet because that kid's not listening to you.
100%.
And they're not doing well.
100%.
And you just keep doing the
Would
same
you see
thing,
Patrick and Bryan
like
cross their arms
again
in a match and just get silent?
Yeah. And I was just thinking, you know, I remember like a lot of moments of silence when I was out there on the mat.
You're like looking back, you're like, I know what that fucker was doing. I got to
imagine like Coach Kanaski, right, my high school coach, who, by the way, is the most winningest coach in Pennsylvania.
No kidding.
Yeah.
Okay.
Or at least was, you know, a couple years ago. Who knows?
And he gets quiet in your corner.
just being like this, you know, kind of sitting back.
Fucking Burns
And
doesn't
it's
listen
like,
anyways.
should I go top or and just like just the stare, you know. I don't know.
But can I tell you, that look right there is perfect because I can tell you all of Brian's story at a tournament a few years ago. He did the same thing to a kid. Kid's not listening.
Yeah.
So when Brian and I talk at a tournament, a lot of these tournaments are recorded, right? Like this is when you know we're in modern times, right? There's a camera on the table, on the scorer's table that points toward the match. Well, we're sitting in chairs, and so we're usually visible and sometimes audible on camera. So one of the things that we'll do is we kind of baseball it, and we'll cover our mouths when we talk, so I don't want the camera to pick up, you know, my lovely cursing that I always do. Mm-hmm. So this kid's wrestling and not listening at all. Same situation. Finally, Brian just like sits back in his chair. He's leaned back, arms crossed. I'm like, oh, Brian's done. So this kid gets ridden out, like taken down, ridden out the whole first period. So I look over at Brian covering my face, and I'm like, Brian, I don't think we go down here because we just got ridden for a whole period. So Brian like just kind of shrugs off what I say and looks at the kid and is like, hey, what do you want? And the kid, of course, gives him this look like, I don't know. And Brian just crosses his arms and goes, you better fucking figure it out. And leans back. And that's the instruction that he gives to this kid. So I look over politely, and I'm like, I'd have just said top. We could have just gone top.
Yeah.
But I think it's true. I think, like, eventually you get frustrated and you're like, well, you're going to wrestle the way you're going to wrestle, so I'm just going to shut up and let it be what it's going to be. So you're thinking your coach did that to you.
Sometimes kids just need to figure it out, right? Like,
so you were that kid. You just needed to figure it out, and you didn't listen to instruction? Is that what you're saying?
You know, I guess there were so many things going on in my head. You know, as a high school kid, you got the cheerleaders like right lining
on the edge of the mat,
right? You're like out there in a tight singlet, and you're not physically developed, right? And you're walking around on a mat in front of all these.
So this is now in your head? This is now in your head? You're
part of like in your head, and then you're thinking about who's in the stands, right? And like who's what, like you're, you know, just self-conscious at that age when you're not, and then, you know, but yeah, I mean, I think I was just a kid. I'm still just a kid.
So
but I was a kid, more of a kid.
You definitely are a kid still. You wrestled varsity, you said your senior year.
Yeah.
So take me through, how did you do? Like how, like, so you
I was like
3 years?
You know, from a record perspective, I was 50-50. I won half, lost half.
Okay.
It was like roughly. I just kind of remember that. And, you know, in the post, you know, people are judged in the sport by their performance at the end of the season, right?
Sure.
How did you do? Like, so in Pennsylvania it goes sectionals, districts, regionals, and then states. And I think our sections was at Mifflinburg, if I'm not mistaken, and I lost. You know, I lost in sectionals. I never made it to I never wrestled in a high school district tournament. So I never wrestled in the tournament, which is the first qualifying event in Virginia, is the district tournament. Right. So I never made it to that point.
That's incredible to me. So you don't make it to that point. So at this point, your high school career is over. Mm-hmm. So you had already, obviously, already been accepted to Bucknell. So
yes, I did.
So why Bucknell? Mm-hmm. Like, why did you want to go to Bucknell?
Yeah. So I guess backing up, so there's two things that I remember. In, you know, two moments where I cried in the sport. One moment was when I took my shoes off after losing in the sectionals, right? So I would say that was kind of a defining moment, right? Like, you've spent 10 years of your life in a sport that's not easy, right? You're cutting a lot of weight. You're committing.
I would argue hardest sport.
So, but also I would say I never really fully kind of committed myself to the sport. I didn't make that decision to like to be good, to be great, you know. And then you realized at some point, like, oh, there's a limited amount of time that you have in this sport, right? And so, you know, if you want to do something in the sport, you better decide you want to do it and work towards it and come to practice with a purpose. And those that decision was made after my high school career
So you
was
took
over.
your shoes off and you're like, oh shit,
Yeah.
maybe I should get
So-
serious.
And it's also interesting to me that like everybody talks about who's calling you, who you talking to, who you getting recruited by. Like
Right.
in high school, I was not recruited by anybody, right? I grew up in this town, and I would go to Bloomsburg. I would watch Bonomos. I would watch Paul Keesaw wrestle over at Bloomsburg University. I would go to Bucknell, and it's like, as a high school kid, you're looking up at these are my role models, right? And so I went to a Bucknell match, and I'm like, and I wasn't going to college just to wrestle. So wrestling was kind of like a secondary consideration.
Okay.
I wanted to go to school for education, but also I had an axe to grind on the mat, right?
Okay.
So I wanted to have kind of both. So to me, Bucknell was a perfect combination of the two. So when I decided, I called the coach up. It's funny, Coach Ferraro, and I said, "Hey, Coach, I'm coming. Can I wrestle? Can I be on the team?"
Right.
Yeah, and do you want to? Can we talk, or can we meet, or can you come to an event? So he came to the Lewisburg. He was from Lewisburg. I don't know that I knew or not at the time that his son was actually on the team, that he was going to be there anyway.
So you thought he came to watch you? Well done. Well done.
So, but at that match, I got tech-fouled by a kid named Vance Noon. And
you look great.
And by the way, he was cranking leg in power half.
So
right?
same stuff
So Coach
you
Ferraro, that's kind of his thing. So he would go into the Lewisburg room and show those kids like some of the techniques that we work on.
Right.
And so he was cranking me with that stuff, and I was trying to fight off my back and whatever. But after the match, I remember exactly where we were, and he said, "You have an interesting way of impressing your college coach." And but he also said, "I liked how you didn't give up." So
Okay.
that was positive.
So he basically said you
I
could
just
walk
flopped
on.
around a lot, I guess. But yeah, so I walked on. He included me in the team. My roommate was a AAA state runner-up by the name of Joe Druck. He lost to Rittenhouse in
Some
the finals.
names. Wow.
And also on the team were a bunch of like state champs, state runner-ups, state placers. Chris Dukas. Several guys. John
Right.
Walliser,
Yeah.
whose brother was Biff Walliser.
Yeah. Like you're
national champ
dropping
at Penn
serious
State.
names.
But these are just guys that I was around. But I remember coach would also, we would be the camp counselors for the Bucknell wrestling camp, and so I remember being at the camp, and at the camp you have instructors coming in like All-Americans, and at that point in time I had decided like I'm going to do everything I can, like lifting religiously training. Every time I'm training and working out, I'm thinking.
Had you ever lifted prior to college?
Not really seriously.
Okay.
No, not not with a program or anything like that. But so anyway, I decided like I want to be great. So I was at a camp, and we were working out like between the sessions. You could work out with the instructors, right? And I was like, I'm actually holding my own against this guy who's an All-American. Who knows if he was letting me do stuff or whatever. But I remember being in my dorm room, kind of surrounded by these guys, right, who I probably don't belong hanging out with. And I'm like, I made the comment, like, I think I could maybe be an All-American. This is like is a freshman.
Right.
Coming from
So you're
background.
you're walking on. I didn't even make it out of sectionals, and you tell these guys who
But
are
I was
true hammers.
hungry for results, right? I had to do something. Like I wasn't going to let 10 years of my life in this sport go by with nothing, right?
Okay.
So I was completely locked on at that point, and recognized that every single second mattered. Every time you're training, every time you're working in a room, whatever it is, technique, strength, conditioning, everything, right? So that was kind of the turning point for me in college.
So what was their reaction when you said?
Oh
I
yeah,
think
I
you could be
mean,
an All-American"?
I remember the laugh.
They're like this
the
walk-on freshman.
hysterical laugh, right, of the people in the room. Like it was, yeah, but it didn't faze me. Like it didn't matter at that point what anybody thought because I knew.
You'd made the decision.
Yeah,
like,
I
I'm gonna be great.
Yeah, yeah.
So take me through like your freshman. So did you redshirt? Did you take take me through some of your?
No,
college?
that's interesting, right? So I was working hard. Coach recognized that. He put me in a couple dual meets, right? And at one match, I was in against an All-American. This is my freshman year, returning All-American, and Coach put me out there against this guy. I think it was at 190. And at that point, I was kind of still growing. I was like 175, 180 maybe.
So you were
I was
light.
still kind of coming up. I was light for the weight class. Coach remembers it better than I do actually, but he tells me this. He's like, because I didn't know who the guy was, right? Yeah. So, but he's like, you were the guy went out to an early lead. And Coach can ask you one of the things, my high school coach, he's like, you run back to the center of the mat all the time. You run back. Like, you're out of bounds. You're always
coached.
You're always the first one back to
ready
the center.
To work.
So I was like, okay, well, if I'm losing, at least I'm going to be working and like going back to the mat first, like and making him work, right? So I just started chipping away at him a little bit. By the end, he was gassed, and I was starting to reel it back a little bit.
I like it.
And so that was like a good sign for him, like early to my coach. And at one point he asked me, he's like, are you planning with your education to be here for 5 years? Because Bucknell doesn't really allow people to just stay on forever. It's a private school. And so they have, he's like, they do have 5-year programs, but you have to be enrolled in them early. It's like, do you think you might be interested in a 5-year program? Because we can redshirt. And I'm like, nah, I don't think I'm doing 5 years. So I didn't redshirt my first year, but I also didn't start. So I could have redshirted.
And you wasted a year.
So I wasted a year of eligibility that first year. Yeah. And then I went on to wrestle, the 3 years.
Okay, so you started the remaining 3 years.
Yeah, I also remember the time where I think maybe it was like one of the captains, the senior captains on the team. I remember having a conversation with my mother, who was always interested in wrestling, right? And I'm like, hey, I'm actually beating the captain on the team, like in practice, right? Is like, what do I do? Like, felt weird, right? Like, how should I
just keep grinding?
Just keep grinding, right? So anyway, so early signs were good for me.
Interesting. Yeah. For those watching that may not know, there's only 77 Division I programs in the country.
Is that right? Yeah.
I think there's 77 Division I programs. So that means in every weight class, there's only 77 starting guys in the country.
Yeah.
And to All-American, just to be clear, that's top eight in your weight class at the Nationals, at the national tournament at the end of the year. Top 8 to All-American. So you went from literally not making sectionals your senior year of high school to walking on to a Division I program in the state of Pennsylvania. So I would argue, I don't even think I have to argue. I think there's probably empirical data that says Pennsylvania is the #1 state for wrestling in the country.
Yeah, without a doubt.
More programs.
Like half of Iowa's lineup is Pennsylvania kids.
Did you see? Speaking of that, Brands was in Bassett's room the other day.
Oh, was he?
Yeah, they caught him. So, I mean,
he loves to recruit from Pennsylvania.
Yeah,
yeah, the Pittsburgh programs especially. Like he's always out there.
So it's interesting. So
Strip Matters program and all that kind of stuff. Yeah.
Yeah, and Strip Matter wrestled at Iowa, right?
Yeah. I think so. Yeah.
Yeah, I think that's where Jody wrestled out there. So I think that's one of the connections to that program. And I'm pretty sure with Young Guns, so Strip Matters Young Guns, I think they have an Iowa branch of Young Guns. So it's just, all full circle.
You know more about that stuff than I do.
Because it's crazy in 2024 the amount of recruiting that occurs even on like a middle school level. Like you talk about, like you weren't recruited in high school. Like these coaches are like coming to middle school events trying to get like kids to come to their programs so that they can basically like train these kids into their high school programs. Like it's insane the amount of competition that occurs nowadays versus, like when we were growing up. But I do want to finish up at Bucknell. So what year?
I can't ask you any questions. All right,
You can. But I do want to know, when did you, like, I think that people should know this. Like, you went from literally not making sectionals. You're an All-American. You're Division I All-American. What year did you break through?
Right. Yeah, so we had a grad assistant come into the room. I think it was my sophomore year by the name of Rob Yos. And he sort of took me on his wing. You know how these grad assistants really, they're workout partners.
For sure.
Kind of pushing people. I was one of his guys,
right?
That he was kind of pushing, right? And I think he saw like I was really wanting to do something, right? And so he pushed me a little harder maybe than some other guys, and I enjoyed it. Like when he pushed me, I was like, "Come on, bring it on, push me harder," right? So I think Rob had a big impact on that. But so our dual meet rider was a big rivalry. There's a guy named Joe Scarpa who was at rider at my weight. He was the returning East Coast, the conference champion. At the dual meet, he was really good with upper body, right? And so he came in upper body, literally like I think my feet were horizontal, right? And like he flipped me around in a circle and like put me on my back and pinned me in the first period, and it was really embarrassing.
Okay. Yeah.
And so, I was like, all right, that's my guy, right? I got to train.
So Scarpa was on your dartboard.
Scarpa was my guy. So like I studied him. I studied like that motion. I looked at it. I was like, what can I just studied him inside and out. And so I would say my first kind of like real success in college was my sophomore year in the conference finals, in the finals wrestling Scarpa to win the conference championship. And so I beat him decisively in that match. Like I think it was 7-2 or something like that.
Nice. So you're conference champion your sophomore year in college.
Right. Yeah. And so it's 3-time conference champ.
That's impressive.
Yeah. And Scarpa was an interesting. He was like he was a Jersey kid, always wore his hat backwards.
Okay.
You could kind of tell
like had that swag to him.
He sort of had. He didn't look like a chiseled athlete. He kind of had a little gut, and you could tell like he was the kind of guy who didn't work too like that hard.
He was just naturally good.
But I'm sure he was a great guy.
But you're like, you might have pinned me one sucker.
A very likable guy, and he was very accomplished. But you could tell he just came naturally to him, and that was Scarpa's personality, But yeah, anyway, he rider, Jersey kid.
So 3-time conference champion.
I love it. Yeah.
What year did you All-American? Because I don't even know the answer.
My
to this.
senior year.
So your senior year, you All-American. What round did you lose in the championship bracket? So like
quarterfinals.
So you made to the quarters before you got bumped. Who'd you lose?
Yeah. So the UFC heavyweight, who's a guy who went on to become the UFC heavyweight champion. What's his name?
You know it.
No, I can't remember. What is it?
Come on, Couture? Randy Couture.
Randy Couture. Yeah.
Yeah.
I don't like your name dropping, but yeah. So Randy, I lost to Randy.
Yeah.
In the quarterfinals.
Oklahoma State.
I think twice. I think it could be. I'm pretty sure I lost to him the year before as well.
So you lose to Randy Couture, who goes on to become the heavyweight champion.
Yeah.
Of the UFC. UFC. Yeah. Pretty good guy. Also, how many times was he a national champ?
Actually, he was not a national
ever.
Champ. He was not that year. So here's the kind of thing. So Paul Keesaw, who I mentioned earlier, I would go watch him wrestle my senior year at Bloomsburg University, right, as a 132 pounder. Now he's in my weight class at 190 as the top seed.
Right.
And Paul said we were hanging out at the Philadelphia. Last time the NCAA's was in Philly.
This year as well, though.
It is, yeah. So we were hanging in the parking lot with some of those guys, and his comment was that when Randy became the UFC heavyweight champion, he became legend, right? Because
He beat him.
like he beat him in the NCAA finals.
So did Couture ever? We should.
No, I don't think he
never a
ever
national
won it.
champion?
No, I think he went on to do things on the world team, maybe the senior world team, but I don't think.
I don't even know if he was a world medalist. Like I don't really know enough about him. I mean, I think he got a lot of notoriety.
Yeah.
In the UFC.
Yeah, a lot of those guys, like that was a time when UFC was in its infancy. Like
Right.
a couple of years, like in the mid 90s, I think
it
it
was
was sort of like
brutal.
that was the time when UFC was started to come around.
Yeah, like Tank Abbott, those guys.
So the guys that I competed against, Randy, Mark Kerr.
Yeah, who also went to the UFC.
Also went to UFC.
But Kerr
they
was
made
a
an
national
HBO
champion.
documentary on Mark Kerr.
Kerr was a national champ, though, right?
Kerr was a national champ. He
Ohio State?
was Syracuse. The year after I graduated, then Mark was the NCAA champ. But I wrestled Mark.
Syracuse doesn't even have a program anymore.
Yeah, it's crazy, right?
crazy.
Yeah, crazy.
It is crazy.
But I beat Mark. So all those guys, the Iowa Hawkeyes, all that,
Yeah, it's impressive.
got to compete against all those guys.
I don't think a lot of people understand.
Penn State wasn't a name back then either. They weren't a program.
they were
They
pretty
sort
bad.
of like there was like they had kind of a lull there, right?
It's so interesting. I don't think a lot of people can really probably appreciate your background and the fact that what I found funny is the other day we were talking, and for those that don't know, Bryan is in the Pennsylvania Hall of Fame.
District 4.
District 4, which is comical. So for all of you laughing or not laughing, you should be, because he is a District 4 Hall of Famer, and he never actually wrestled in that tournament because he didn't make it out of sectionals. So how funny is it that you end up being
But Patrick,
Hall of Fame?
you're a Virginia State champ,
here
and
we
your
go.
name's on the wall.
Yeah, here we
Brent's-
go. Yeah, but that's nothing compared to PA.
No, but like I walk into practice and you're all like decked out in your stuff, and I'm like, "There's Patrick." And then I look at your name.
Here we
on the
go.
wall,
Here
I'm
we
like,
go. Yeah, it's nothing compared to like, hey kids, here's your Division I All-American. Yeah, like I'm just gonna step over here to the side and let the real guy show up. But yeah, I think that's really impressive that you're in the Pennsylvania Hall of Fame in the district that you never even wrestled in, which is amazing.
Yeah,
So your college
I'm
career
the
eclipses.
only. I have to believe I'm the only wrestler in the Pennsylvania District 4 Hall of Fame who never competed in the district tournament.
It's like incredible. Here you are, like, oh yeah, by the way, I'm a Division I All-American wrestler.
Yeah.
Out of Bucknell, which is insane. How many All-Americans have come out of Bucknell?
I would say, I'm just gonna guess and say 10 or less. Like I could be wrong there, but I'm gonna say 10-ish, something like that. Yeah, I was the second. Tommy Marchetti continuously reminds me of that. If you're
I do.
I
met Tommy Marchetti at an event
Yeah.
because his kid wrestles in the same hammer tournaments that our kids go
Yeah.
to. Yeah, so he
good
did.
guy.
He definitely reminded you that you were the second
the second.
All-American from Bucknell,
Yeah.
and that he was, in fact, the first. So, all right, so what did you major in? Like, I don't think I know this.
Yeah,
I've known you a while, and I don't even think I know what you majored in college.
I was an electrical engineer, so technology's always been kind of my thing. I'm a geek, believe it or not. Yeah,
I do know.
Or maybe, I guess maybe not hard to believe, but so in high school, my dad bought an Apple II computer. I geeked out on kind of learning BASIC and just kind of dived into technology. So
you got into that in college.
yeah, so electrical engineering, also double major in economics. So double major.
Wow.
Yeah. So
At
that was kinda
Bucknell,
my
which is practically an Ivy League school.
you could say practically.
kinda like a
kinda
UVA
it's kind of
here.
like on the Lehigh. When kids look at engineering schools in PA, they look at Lehigh. They look at Bucknell.
Okay.
Those are two schools. It's also got a good business program as well.
I mean, it's a great school. So you
Yeah.
double majored,
Yeah.
and then career-wise. So wrestling ends in college, but it doesn't end for you. Because you
It
decided to
didn't, but
take...
yeah, it was tough back then because if you're in small town where I was, and you want to work out and kind of like train to go further in the sport, you got to
Right.
kind of figure out like, where am I going to do that? Where am I going to train? Who am I going to train with? Right. And so you look around. I went to the world team trials, and you know the senior world team trials. I was on the U23 world team.
That's not a small feat. You just glass over. I was on the U23 world team. Like it's not an accomplishment. Like, oh yeah, just made that small team.
And then
How many guys are on the world team?
However many weight classes there are, like what, 10,
10,
something like that.
11, yeah.
Yeah,
Just,
something like that.
You know, just
Yeah.
best in the world.
In the U.S.
In the US,
I guess,
yeah.
U23. But
Small accomplishment.
U23 at the age.
Oh yeah, it's just still a
U23.
really small accomplishment. We'll just keep diminishing it.
University level.
Yeah, because you're only wrestling the best guys in college for that spot.
So funny story about my mom. So we went to the U23 World Team Trials, and my mom signed me up for this. She's like, "Hey, I think you should go to this event because
Mom's still signing you up.
Yeah,
for
mom's still
tournaments.
signing me up, right? But we didn't have RTCs back then,
Right?
So you didn't really have a place to. We didn't train probably like Iowa trained all year round on campus. We didn't.
Right.
So we would go home and we'd come back during in session school. And so this was in the off season in the summer, and so my mom signs me up, and we go.
Love it.
Right, it's kind of silly, right? But we go to this tournament, and I was there. It was at State in the Bryce Jordan Center on Penn State campus, right? And so I didn't have a coach there, right? As you know, like even in youth, like you got to have a coach in the corner, right? So I like to say that my mom beat Dan Gable. She outcoached Dan Gable. So
I love it.
So I had to have somebody in my corner. So I said, "Mom, do you mind just being in my corner?"
I love it. I love it.
So she's in my corner, and Dan Gable's in the other corner.
Love it.
Right.
I love it.
With the
only the most like. Is he still the winningest coach in all of college wrestling?
Yeah, I don't know.
I think he probably is.
Yeah.
But yeah, he's in the corner.
Yeah.
Iowa's head coach in the corner against you. I love it.
So, and I was in the semifinals. And then I think she kind of got a little nervous in the finals. And she's like, she found some guy.
She's like, I'm going to need you to stand in right here. I'll be on the edge, but I need you to be the guy
So
in
is
front.
this little short kind of Russian guy.
Okay.
Was my coach in the finals.
Hold on. Is he like literally Russian?
He came from Russia. Yeah.
Does he speak English?
He spoke very broken English. Yeah.
Is he coaching you? Like, is he actually coaching? Is he yelling anything? Or is
So
he just
that was the
standing
first time that I met who we call Sasha.
Okay.
Who became my coach. And, the story of Sasha kind of got back to my head to Coach Ferraro at Bucknell. And that's how Sasha became one of our assistant coaches at Bucknell.
Your mom
in my
grabbed
corner.
Your mom grabbed the random Russian guy and said, "I need you to coach my son."
Yeah,
that's so random.
That's pretty funny.
It coached you to a U23 World Finals to make the team.
Right. Yeah.
Who did you knock off in the finals? You remember?
I did not knock this person off in the finals, and the name is I should. He was probably one of I wrestled him in the finals of Lock Haven, and I was thinking like, what's that? Yeah. Anyway, the name I should know.
Okay.
Yeah, but he couldn't go, and so
I
you
lost in the final, and you were the alternate.
I was the alternate.
And so then you got bumped up. Still, it's amazing.
Yeah.
Amazing. So a guy who doesn't make it through sectionals.
So back to like that was the weave, right? Like back to the question, like, do I keep wrestling on the senior world team? So I go to the senior world team trials, and I wrestled Chris Barnes, who was undefeated his senior year,
really good.
not taken down, outstanding wrestler of the NCAA tournament. I wrestle him first round of the tournament, and I'm beating him with 10 seconds left. Took him down a couple times, and he just reversed me or whatever. He rolled me, like front headlock rolled, got a couple points, kind of beat me. But anyway, so as I'm there, I'm kind of looking around like, who's here? Who do you train with? Like, how do you get to that next level? And at the time, it was Foxcatcher.
Okay.
Right, that was the place to go, and it's down in Philly.
Right.
and Dave Schultz is there, Mark Schultz is there.
Yeah, incredible names.
And so how do I live like, it's just like, what do you do as a kid when,
Like,
how
do you pay rent?
But I'm looking at those guys, and it was kind of weird, right? Because you got John DuPont kind of walking around in his sweatsuit, looking like Squidward, kind of like with his hips in front, and these guys around him, and you're like, it was kind of weird, right? It was sort of a weird circumstance, and I'm like, okay, that guy's got a lot of money,
right?
And everybody is kind of circling him and like trying to get his attention and kind of boost his ego, and I'm like, I don't know, like it didn't really turn me on as a kid who had other options. I'm like, I don't know if I'm like want to go do that.
So that was it,
and that was kind of it.
So you made kind of
so
the
I
decision.
lost to Barnes, and then I think that was my last match. Yeah,
literally that was your last competitive match. Mm-hmm. And how old were you at this time? Roughly?
Oh, like 23. I mean, 22 maybe. 20. Okay. Yeah, something like that.
So that was it. So you made the world team. Did you compete with the world team?
With the U23 world team, I did. Yeah.
So how was that? Was it a good experience?
That was really cool. Yeah. I mean, you're on the team with kind of some of the elite U23 wrestlers in the U.S. and you're traveling together.
Yeah.
Right?
Like what countries did you hit?
We went to Paris and we worked out with the French Olympic team. I remember there was a guy on their team. So the French Olympic team, right? It's like there's not like immaculate. It was like a high school track, like a gravel track, and it was dilapidated buildings in Paris.
No kidding.
Where we trained for a week, and so worked out with this guy who was third in the world, which was kind of cool to kind of get to work out with him, and I felt like I was holding my own, doing pretty well with them. And then we went to Czechoslovakia. It was a small town kind of northeast of Prague. And I had been out the night before. And I remember we were at some like seedy dance club thing. And I had something, I don't know if it was like champagne or something like that, right? So always be careful when you're traveling. Don't drink anything other than something that came from a container bottle. that you like a Coke can or a water, So I drank. So I woke up the next day and I had some horrible like stomach, like my stomach felt horrible. That's my excuse anyway.
Yeah. It's not how much you drank of it, maybe.
Yeah. And so we all got on the bus and I'm like, hold on, I got to, and I had to go
exit
run.
stage left. Yeah.
So, so it wasn't the greatest day. And I think that's the thing, like with these events, I think Dake had some issues.
He did.
When he went and competed overseas. And if you have a bad day, you're not feeling great, it's one day. So the tournament's on one day. So if you didn't do well, you didn't do well. Yeah.
Like it's over. Congratulations. Yeah, I get it. So you didn't compete well. Right. You didn't feel well. I get it. All right. So end of worlds, you graduate Bucknell. Yeah. You marry your wife.
Yep. Got married kind of right after college, got a mortgage, got a dog.
Just life.
Life happened real quick.
You got into the family station wagon.
Yeah, I think I tried to assistant coach at Bucknell for a year. At the same time, I was also taking master's coursework at Bucknell in electrical engineering. Wow. So, all that, like everything, like life.
Yeah.
Yeah. So
then what brought you to Virginia?
Yeah.
Because here you are. So what brought you to Virginia?
I would say it's a little circuit. So I worked at a small wireless company, a small RSA in Pennsylvania for 5 years. That company got bought out. Telecoms all kind of combined. Right. After that happened, I took a job that my professor at the time at Bucknell passed up. It was writing code down in D.C. with a company owned by the Post. Company called Legislate, which I don't even know if it's still around. I was living in Chantilly and working in DC and couldn't take the commute. I was like, it was with the newborn at home with my wife staying at home. So she's at home in a strange environment coming from it's culture shock.
Right.
So, that was a year and I was like, we gotta change things here. Right. So I reached out to my contacts from that small rural wireless company. They were starting a company in Nashville. So I moved to Nashville to start up a company named NextLink that turned into Exo Communications. And so that was 5 years there. Had a lot of great mentors along the way there. Russ Land was instrumental in just my career. But then that company was kind of driven into bankruptcy. Carl Icahn took ownership. The headquarters relocated to Reston, and I'm back.
Got it.
Yeah. So now I decided to kind of move to the headquarters with the new regime, have some kind of influence in the new company where I was, and found my way back. And then kind of coming back, it was a better conditions because I was a little more financially stable.
Right.
I was working in Northern Virginia and commuting from Western Northern Virginia.
Into
right.
Northern
So
Virginia,
it was
so it
kind of
wasn't a
a
terrible
little
commute.
easier for
Right.
me work-wise. Yeah. And then at that point, you moved into Haymarket, Virginia, and everything's like exploding, right?
It's insane.
And,
The amount of
Yeah.
growth in Western Prince William County.
High schools popping up all over the place. No history, no legacy, nothing like where I grew up, where you have this long legacy of the
Probably
sport.
closest thing is Brentsville, right?
Yeah.
Like the closest thing that you can probably relate that to is a small school in Western Prince William, which is Brentsville. That's the only
It's
one
the
that
only
has
one
the
that
storied
has history, and that's so I gravitate towards that really because it's like, this is cool. We've got
Well, it's still a
history.
small town.
Fauquier is a little bit like that.
Yeah,
too,
small town feel.
Yeah.
Like you even have like Osborne Park has been around for a minute, but they just never were really good at anything.
Yeah.
So I don't know if there's any storied history because it's like, great, you've been here a while, but you were never really good.
Yeah.
At least Brentsville, they were pretty good in a few sports that they have
Right.
that storied tradition.
Yeah, and I think sometimes like I put myself in your shoes and how cool it would be to like have your kid working out in the room where you were the state champion, names on the wall.
I don't know if I like that though. I don't know if I like
I just
that.
think it's got to be really cool, and people.
It's not though. Like
Right.
it's cool and it's not cool. Like it's not cool because I never want my kids to feel like there's a certain stigma or pressure or because I mean let's be honest, I don't even know if my kid's going to go to public school for high school. So I mean he may not even have the opportunity to wrestle there.
Yeah. I think the culture's great there,
I do too. We have a good relationship with the coaching staff there, with the AD. So I mean, it's a comfortable place.
Yeah.
Whether I can convince my wife or not that we're going to do public school is definitely a different question. But regardless, I mean, there's so many private schools in the area too. I just don't know really. That's a difficult decision. You sent your kids, to public school. Your son wrestled. Mm-hmm. You got the opportunity to kind of coach your kid up through.
Yeah.
So how was that? Like, I know I lean on you a ton.
Yeah, it was
with
funny,
my kids because I know
right.
you've been there.
No, it was a great. So, when you're first coaching coaching youth. Right, I remember I was coaching with Jamie Carrianis. Right, we started the Haymarket Hurricanes, the youth program, out of Battlefield High School, which is now merged with FCA. Right, but back then, it was me, Johnny Curtis, Jamie Carrianis.
It's
right?
crazy.
And Wittenberg as well. Kind of the four of us really kind of coached and traveled with the kids and and brought those kids up through that youth program into high school. But yeah, it's like I remember Jamie saying, "All right, Brian, we're gonna work on front headlocks today. So what do we show from a front headlock?" And I'm like,
Yeah, you gotta like think back to how you're gonna show and teach.
Yeah,
You're like, I can do
right.
one.
Yeah, so being good
Totally
at
relate.
wrestling is it's very different than knowing how to and what to coach, right? But just because something worked for you doesn't necessarily mean it's going to work for
It
every
doesn't
other
even
kid
mean
in
that
the
it's
room.
right.
Yeah,
Like,
that's
like,
right.
like-
Yeah. So that was pretty interesting, and over the years, it's you start to learn like, okay, this is what we're going to do. This is what works for most of the kids. This is solid. This is good foundational technique. And, I made all those mistakes on my kid growing up, right? So, unfortunately, yeah, but, he did very well, and I'm very proud of him. Actually, I'm proud of him for having an accomplishment in high school when I didn't, because he had the same body type that I did. But, just being able to hang your hat on something and not have it be an axe that you have to grind throughout. I benefited from that in some ways, but also, there's opportunity cost for everything, right? So in life, but
it's tough to coach a kid.
It is tough to coach a kid.
It's so
and I became
tough to coach
a much better coach after my kid left the program, because I don't care who you are, like you're always kind of paying attention to your kid
so hard.
in the room. It's so hard.
I try.
And you have to really pay. You have to help everyone, and it's really hard also to help a kid who's going to potentially beat your kid out in the lineup.
100%.
Right? It's nobody talks about this stuff, but it's real. It's there.
Yeah, I mean, I would say it's almost impossible to root against your own kid. Like, it's just like, it's almost impossible to be like, oh, I really hope my kid, like, gets his teeth kicked in by this kid. Like,
yeah.
It's really tough, but equally, it's really, like, no one talks about how hard it is to just coach your kid.
Yeah.
Like, to connect on a level where, like, you can maintain this respect line of, like, not losing your complete shit when your kid is,
No, totally. Yeah. And, every father has that tendency to do the beat down on the way home, the windshield talk, right?
Yeah.
Like, what,
It's the one thing I do not do.
Dude.
Yeah. Like,
We just drove 4 hours and really?
Yeah, but like last year, like the one.
And you regret those, right? That's something you regret.
Generally speaking, I've learned not to have, like, when we hit the car on the ride home, it's either silence, we listen to music, but we don't talk wrestling.
Yeah.
Like, we can talk what we're going to have for dinner. We can talk, but we're not going to talk about what just happened. Like, I've just learned that it's not going to be fruitful for him and it's not going to be fruitful for me. So you just don't talk about it. But last year, I'll never forget, we go up to Powerade. Powerade is one of the toughest individual open tournaments in the country. Like, if not the. Like, if you ask Liam would tell you, like, Powerade's the hardest tournament he wrestles in every year.
Yeah, so you walk into that room, right, and it's like there's kids like drilling stuff, like technique, and they're drilling like they should be drilling, like hard, and you're like, yeah, these kids they
know what's up. Yeah,
know what's up.
Yeah, so Liam, his first year in that tournament, went 2-2 and felt pretty good. Like, okay, that was the year that the power went out. And I'll never forget, Coach Burns over here is in the corner, and Liam's in the quarters, and Burns just looks at him right before he's about to wrestle, and Burns goes, "Hey, you're the furthest any Virginia Patriots ever made it, just so you know. So if you win this, you'll really, like, be making some history here." And I'm like, way to fucking tell my kid that, like, 28 seconds before he's going to wrestle. And then, as luck would have it, the entire power in the gymnasium goes out. So we lose power. Yeah. Now the match is delayed. So my kid is now standing in a corner, cold as hell, like, okay, my head coach just told me if I win this, it's the furthest anyone's ever made it. Super solid. And he's got to wrestle this kid who looks like he's on TRT from freaking Altoona. This kid comes out, like, super jacked, and I'm like, yeah, well, some kids develop faster than others. And my kid proceeds to go out and lose, like, I don't know, 12-6 or whatever. He ends up losing the match, and he comes off pissed off, and ends up in the consies and loses the very next match. So he goes 2-2, and I would say in that tournament a really good outcome. I mean, you went 50-50 in one of the hardest tournaments in the country. That's really not bad. And your 2 wins were in the championship side, not even the consies. So it's not like you lost your first match, got a couple back. You won 2 in the championship round. That's pretty solid. But we go last year. And last year was the first year PJ entered, my younger son. And PJ went like 0-2 pretty quick. Liam dropped his first match in a really tight match to a really good kid, and came back in the consies and had to wrestle another really good kid and lost another tight one. I think he lost both matches by like 2 points. Like they were both tight matches, and he was like livid to go up to that tournament and go 0-2 after the year before he went 2-2. I think he felt like it was a big failure. So the car ride home, Liam's not usually one to talk, and he just looked at me with like nearly tears in his eyes, and he was just like, "I'm really sorry that we traveled all the way up here, Dad," and I went 0-2.
That's pretty mature.
And I was like, "Son, we're not going to talk about it, but like, this is why we're here." You know, like it was just like, "Hey, we're here because we want to wrestle the best, and sometimes you're going to go 0-2."
Yeah.
Like the expectation is not we're going to come here and like you're going to sweep everybody. Like we're here to get better.
Yeah.
And you got better. And you know, next year you got a chip on your shoulder maybe. And it's like, okay, I'm not going to go 0-2.
Yeah. I'm always amazed at the resiliency of our kids and their ability to get their teeth kicked in.
Because we do go to every hammer tournament in the country. We're just like,
continue. Hey. Well, it's like, you know, we got my cousin's son on the team, who's a first-year wrestler, and we're throwing him out there to the wolves, right? And literally, losing all of his matches.
Yeah,
I think he made it into the second period once.
Yeah, he did
at
the
Iron last Man. Tyrant event.
Yeah, at Iron Man.
But I mean, and then you kind of like, he loses, he's upset. You look behind, and the team, and he's talking with the teammates, and everybody's kind of like they're having a good time. And it's the team that kind of helps the kids kind of get through that. And but also, I think it's good. I mean, it's healthy from a wrestling perspective, that we're teaching kids good fundamental technique. And they're not learning bad habits by having things work that shouldn't work.
Right.
At the novice level, they're realizing very quickly what's not going to work.
Right. Even on a Virginia level, right? Like, things are going to work.
So if you can put up with that, and you're going to grow through it, and then you kind of come back to these more local events where the competition's not national level, and you're going to do really well as a result of going through that experience.
Even last year.
And it's hard as a parent to watch your kid go through that. It's probably actually harder to counsel the parents through that than it is to counsel the kid through that. If the parent can put up with it, right, and kind of make it through
without slamming your cell phones,
watching their son get demolished over and over again, then there's some growth opportunity there. But yeah, I think the other thing that I've really enjoyed, yourself included, is just the relationships with the kids, the parents. I mean, you get to see the whole. I always say, like, you get to see it all on the wrestling mat. You get to see the personalities, the character of the kid. You get to see the relationships between the kids and the parents, right? You get to help the kids. You get to help the parents along the way. That's, to me, that's all part of it, for sure.
Yeah, I think it's huge, but I mean,
or be part of it. You're like part of that. You're like right in the middle of it.
Yeah.
Yeah.
And sometimes, my mouth gets the best of me, and I have to be careful because, you're coaching middle school. Yeah, well, I mean, I think we're kind of a pair when it comes to some of this, but I mean, yeah.
Good cop, bad cop.
Yeah, I mean, sometimes.
Which one am I? So we're both.
It depends on the day. Like, I think we play well off each other. Like, if you're going to be bad cop, I'm like, okay, today I got to be like the nice guy because Coach Burns is going to come unglued on the first kid. Like, and then sometimes, like, I have a short fuse, and I'm like, we're here to get better. Basically shut the fuck up and pay attention.
Right. So I appreciate that sometimes.
Yeah, I mean, you said it last night at practice when I was like, why is everyone walking? Hurry the fuck up. Like, come and sit down. And I was like, I just told everyone to hurry the fuck up.
Right.
And they're like, 10 and 12-year-olds.
Yeah.
But, I mean, we sent last year to the state tournament, like, I don't know, 4 kids in 12U. And we walk away with, like, the runners-up of the entire 12U division.
Right.
Well, that's only because our 12Us have been hammered on all year at these tournaments. And then we come to a Virginia tournament, and we're like, oh, like, Now we get to be the hammer and they get to be the nail, and we start hammering on kids,
Yeah.
and we score a lot of team points because we're sticking the snot out of all these Virginia kids who don't do what we're doing.
Mm-hmm.
And then you got a club like, I don't know, the Rangers, for example, who send like 100 kids to the state tournament. We send like 12, and we end up winning one age group or running up one age group because our kids are just good.
Yeah.
So there's a big difference, and I think that's where parent buy-in starts to show up. They're like, oh, like when we actually wrestle in local stuff, my kid's actually really good.
Yeah.
Well, yeah, because you're wrestling the best in the country the entire year.
Right.
So I like the trajectory that we're on, and I can really appreciate the fact that that you're the coach and you're the one that's sort of captaining the ship toward where we go. So you formed the Virginia Patriots. What year did you do this with Jackson, with your son?
Yeah, we did. We were in at the time in the Federation League here in Northern Virginia, where now it's turned into more like the Mason
merged
Dixon.
with Mason Dixon.
Yeah. And so I would say after a year, maybe 2 years, when our kids were kind of ready to go to something else, right? And at the time, it was the CAW League, Capital Area Wrestling League. That's where everybody went, and it was sort of like this league. It was a dual team where you had to participate. You had to go to all of the dual team events that were sanctioned by the association, and there were other events that you couldn't go to because of that, right? And so there were other cool things that you couldn't do. So we just decided to, like, I would say we might be one of the first clubs that really did this as the way, like, we don't participate in a league. We never have.
Right.
We don't participate in Mason-Dixon League. We don't do anything.
And we don't care about that stuff.
We don't commit to any schedule. We don't pay an associate. So we train, and then we just try, like, back when we started, I was talking to Jamie, and we're trying to decide what to do. I said, when I was a kid, there's all these open tournaments in Pennsylvania. And so that's kind of how we started.
Yeah.
And we would it was pretty fun, actually, to, like, hey, let's check out like, I had some friends, like the North Allegheny Dream Team back in the late 80s was the nationally ranked number one team. They have a great youth club, Pittsburgh's. So it was like, hey, let's go to the North Allegheny Youth Wrestling Tournament. Like, and let's go to, like, let's go travel around.
Yeah.
Like, let's figure it out. And so we just started traveling to these places and starting to find out what events made sense to go to. But that's how we started.
And now we pretty much just do Tyrant. So Tyrant is, Corey puts on a really good tournament.
Yeah, and what I like about his events, shout out to Corey.
Yeah, no doubt. Corey
he's combined the best of, like, dual team events with open events on the same day.
Right.
So what we were hesitant about was committing to a dual team where we had like 4 or 5 75-pounders, right? So you have one kid that's going to start and the other kids have to sit the bench. Well, that's not going to work. And then we have all these holes.
Right.
So you're constantly recruiting kids
from outside your room.
But the nice thing about the Tyrant events is there's this free agent list. So it's not like you're recruiting kids from, local competitors clubs or whatever. And, so there's a lot of kids that are ready, that are on the bench, that'll fill in those spots. Right. And there's also enough. Corey makes things very flexible, right? Exhibition matches and so forth are always an option, and then the open tournaments there.
Which is awesome. If you have 4 74-pounders, okay, you got one that starts, and then the 3 other guys. Hey, guess what?
Yeah.
You can enter into this open tournament and get 6 or 7 matches in for the weekend.
Yeah.
Still really solid competition. Really solid.
Yep. So that's I really like the model, and there's a lot of great competition that goes to those events.
So that's the Virginia Patriot way at this point.
Yeah, at this point, yeah. And a lot of that also is just from experience. Like, so we had, you remember Evan, obviously. I know he coaches your son as well, but so I was kind of anti-dual team event for a while, right? And because of that, because of what I just described, right? But then, I'm like, Evan, you really need to go compete in these Tyrant events, and that's fine. Go do it, guest, be a free agent,
Right.
find a team, and he found a team, oddly enough, with an old teammate of mine, Corey Dieter, whose son is now killing it. But anyway, so he went, I kind of like go forth and
find your way.
Good competition.
Yeah.
Right. And I wasn't there. Right. And now the model is, rather than exclude your best kids, right, and have them go compete somewhere else, it's like, no, let's bring everybody to the competition, and everybody has to kind of come up a level, right, rather than alienate your best kids who are looking for that competition. So, that's the thought process now. And like I said, kids seem to be growing through it enough. So it's, we'll keep with that model for now. Yeah.
I joke with Burns, he's going to have to coach into his 70s. So.
Yeah. My body can hold out.
I mean, I'm just hoping like I can convince you to like find a private school in the next year so that you can take over their high school program, and I'll just send Liam there, and we'll just continue to we'll have the Patriots in the high school.
What about PJ and Declan?
Yeah, but I mean, we gotta we'll just keep it full circle. We'll just have multiple programs. It's totally doable. You have plenty of time, right?
It could be like the feeder program to the private school.
We have an RTC.
It would be a middle school RTC for the private school.
Like what all of them are doing anyways.
Right.
Like it's insane to me the amount of recruitment that occurs.
Yeah.
Like sincerely, like Liam will people will come up, hey, where's he going to high school? And I always know what that is. It's some coach where's he going to high school, which is really like, hey, could you come and take a look at this high school because we'd really like to have someone come in.
Crazy, right?
7th grade.
Kids getting recruited to high schools.
Yes.
Crazy.
And now they're all talking about NIL money coming and infiltrating into private school high schools.
Mm.
And now you have VHSL, which I'll say is probably a mistake. Seth Cameron and I disagree on this, but they made their rule. You can only have 5 tournaments that aren't essentially VHSL sanctioned, outside. So that means if you're trying to get noticed, let's be honest, wrestling in Virginia, it's really hard to get noticed by some of the bigger Division I programs.
You got to do something at national tournament.
Right.
Yeah.
So if you're limited to 5, right, then your school has to essentially support you going to some of these, and some of them are invite only. You're not going to Powerade unless your school gets invited. Yeah. You're not going to Beast unless your school gets an invite, right? So there are certain spots that are allocated to your school. So it gets really difficult. Virginia puts a hamstring on that and says you only get 5. Well, for some kids, that might be really hard. What's the school down Stanton River, right? If you're at Stanton River, your local competition is going to be terrible. Mm-hmm. You're not going to get noticed at Stanton River.
They're going to
so they got to go to Beast. They're going to Powerade. Yeah, they have to go to those national tournaments. Yeah. Because otherwise, those kids aren't getting Roby from Virginia Tech isn't taking a ride out to see their dual event against Strasburg because no one cares. So they're going to have to go to Powerade and to Beast, and I think VHSL really hamstrung a lot of programs, and they're doing it for the we want to be inclusive so that people aren't excluded. Well, I'm sorry, you just excluded a lot of kids from rural programs that may not have the ability to get noticed now by a bigger program. Yeah. So I think you did more harm to Virginia than you did good. And, because now all those kids are going to do is those that have the ability, they're going to go to private schools.
Yeah.
It doesn't matter how good the program is. If you're good, now you have the opportunity to go to all these national tournaments. So as long as you have one good wrestling partner in that room, that's all you need.
Yeah.
You don't care how the team does. It's all about how do I get my exposure at these national tournaments.
Yeah, that's right. Yeah.
So I think it's really a problem for public schools with that.
Yeah, and you gotta go to a school also with a coaching staff who recognizes that and is willing to take those kids, right? When it might just be 4 kids in the room, or maybe it's 1 or 2 kids.
Right.
You gotta give that kid the exposure, right? Otherwise, you're not doing that kid a service. You're doing that kid a disservice.
Yeah, and I think
by forcing him to just compete locally here. You
Yeah.
got to get him
100%, because
Yeah.
I mean, like, you know, if you want to get looked at by any of the bigger Division I programs, really almost any Division I program when you
Yeah.
think about it, like, they're not going to be recruiting at some small tournament, right? Like,
Yeah.
your coaches are going to be at Beast, Powerade, Iron Man. Like, they're going to be at all of these tournaments that either
right.
you're in and doing well or you're not. And even off
No,
season.
yeah, and you can do some things out of season on your own, like Super 32.
Right.
Or, you know,
And even on the
NHSCA,
freestyle, yeah.
Shout out to Ferraro's. Right.
Yeah.
That's a great tournament.
It is.
It's amazing. So the NHSCA was founded by my head coach, my college coach, at an office in Lewisburg, and I sold him his first computer because back in the day, right?
Of course you did.
And it had some issues. I could never really fix it. So the marketing.
So you
guy,
sold him a bad
I
computer?
sold him 11, I think.
Well done.
Yeah, right. But that tournament has gone crazy. I mean, they have like 60 something like 60 mats going on.
I mean,
teams coming in from all over the country.
It's at Virginia Beach every year, so we went.
They have
May?
duels. They have the open.
Yeah, so the open.
It's amazing.
So they do the duels, I think, for high school, right? The younger kids, like middle school, like Liam's age. So we went for the first time over the summer.
And now Bobby, his son, is running it. Bobby was my workout partner and 2-time All-American.
Yeah, it was.
Shout out.
Yeah, it was
Bobby.
so good. So we went to Virginia Beach, and I think Liam had like 40 kids in his bracket. I mean, it was like massive and huge, and it was great. His first match, I won't forget this. He wrestles a kid in like a PA state champ singlet. And like, you know, they always, you know, a lot of those kids will wear that stuff. It's like an intimidation factor. Like, yeah, I'm a state champ in PA. And Liam ended up sticking the kid in like the third period. He pretty much broken the kid. And the kid got up pissed and was like, went over to his coach, which I think was his dad, and was like loudly, like, I can't believe I just lost to a kid from Virginia, right? Because that's what we get.
Right.
And Liam overheard it and like got a little chippy. And Liam came over and gave me a big high five. And he goes, "It's always good when you can stick a kid in a PA singlet, like just loud enough to get a shot back." But it's a tough tournament. Like NHSCA's are also out of season. Tough tournament. Like, kids there are wrestling year round. Yeah. And then you've got, you know, your Fargos, your freestyle, which is all huge for getting noticed by those bigger programs. But
no doubt. Yeah.
Oh, I have to ask my one question.
All right.
This is like
this is like the
this
one
is
question.
Like this is
the
like
one question
so,
at the end.
Yeah.
This is gonna be a thing.
Yes.
You're
I'm
gonna
gonna
ask everybody this question.
Everybody this question.
What if I don't know an answer?
Then you can say, I don't know. But so the question that I'm going to ask every guest is, are you at a place in life now where you thought you would be, and are you or did you do the thing that you thought you would do by the time you're at this place in life?
Yeah, no, that's a great question. I would say early, like, I think in everyone's career early on, everybody's trying to like make it big and make it fat, make it quick, right? And then at some point in life, you realize if you didn't do that, right, at some point, and I think you probably have, you know, you've been very successful, right? But at some point, you're like, okay, well, this is going to be kind of the way. This is going to be the grind. This is what I'm going to do. And then at some point you start to think you're at a point in life where like, okay, in my mid-late 50s, like retirement is starting to get closer, but I could live till like 90, 80s, whatever. So what am I going to do? Right? How am I going to contribute? How am I going to give back? Right? And again, it's kind of like, well, maybe I just keep doing what I'm doing. Right? I'm already
grind,
contributing. I'm already kind of in the grind, and I'd like to think I'm trying to make a difference with kids, right? And so
for sure you are.
So yeah, I mean, I would just give people the advice, in your life, live fearlessly, kind of don't be scared to be successful. Try to live with intent, as it pertains to like the example we talked about with wrestling is come into the room with a purpose, live with a purpose. Same thing in careers. Like, I think a lot of people kind of live with the fear of success in some ways. And so don't be scared to be successful. But I guess I feel like I've been successful in my athletic career, if you will, because of that, because with intention and purpose. And I think the same is true in my work life. I've been successful at work. I think I've gotten to a point in both that I'm satisfied with. Sometimes, satisfaction is the what do they say is the enemy of greatness, right? But yeah. I'm okay with that. I'm satisfied with where I am. I'm happy with what I do. I enjoy what I do for work. I never don't look forward to going to practice and helping the kids out. Even now with 4 days a week. So I enjoy that.
Yeah, it's the first time you've done this.
We'll see how that grinds on in January and February.
For sure.
But and also I enjoy the relationships I have outside. I'm big into cycling. I got some friends in the cycling group.
Yeah, you are we can really bite down on that for a second. That's true. You are a machine. So let me just tell everyone who's watching about this guy's snapshot of his heart rates when he's on a ride. This guy is superhuman. Like, what is your what would you say your average? Do you know your average heart rate? Like when you're on a grind.
Well, so here's the thing. I ride with a lot of fast guys.
See, here it is. So the excuses are coming with the here's how I push myself.
I have friends in that group, and so there's this pressure when you have friends in that group, you've got to be fit. Right. And you got to keep up. Right. And so I'm probably one of the least fit and probably the heaviest. Like you look at me, I'm like 200 pounds. Like that guy's not a cyclist. Right.
Yeah. But you're 6. How tall are you?
6'2".
Yeah.
Right. But so I'll go out on these rides. And in order to just keep up, my heart rate has to get pegged at a high heart rate for long periods of time.
Let's describe what that heart rate is. Go ahead. Like, what would you say?
Like 160s, 170s, like peaks in at 185, something like that.
For how long?
Yeah, and so for hours, like hour, 2 hours. Yeah,
it's insane. Like, it's insane.
But
he sent me a snapshot of this, and I'm like, I'd be dead.
Yeah.
Like, it would just be like, Patrick has left the building.
But it's hard for me to kind of like maintain my friendships because all these guys are just like talking with each other, and I'm like, I can't even talk. So it's hard to have relationships on the bike, sometimes.
Because you can't talk?
Because I can't talk. I'm just
so they're talking through all of this.
Yeah, these guys are just like talking, riding up hills, and I'm like, yeah.
Are you kidding me? They talk through that? Like, that's insane.
But you like VO2 max, all the natural, markers. You have a good, like I looked at your VO. You have a very naturally high
48.
VO2 max.
48.
Which is excellent for your age range, right? That's it's pretty good.
It's not bad, but like my heart rate into the heart rate, like I'm you know what? I'm gonna look and I'm gonna look through some of these screens.
Yeah.
I'm telling you, your heart rate is insane.
My heart. No, what it means is I'm out of shape and I'm working really hard. What it means is, I just work hard, right?
Yeah, I just work hard. Like, do you think so? So while I'm looking for, here we go. 181 beats per minute.
So let me give you a sense of the guys that I've ridden with over the years. So
that was on like a 8-minute cycle.
That's your heart rate. Is that your heart rate?
That's you.
Oh, that's me. Okay, so that's the one I sent you. Yeah.
Yeah, max heart rate 181 on this. Your average on your entire ride. Over, it's insane. 181 was your max and your average heart rate on this ride for over 20 plus miles was 172 beats per minute. Like, that's insane. For those of you watching, like, that is stupid push yourself ability.
Yeah.
Like, you wonder why you were so great at wrestling? I know why. I know why your coach loved you, because you have no quit. So anyone that can put their heart rate in that zone and just be like, hey, this is really uncomfortable. I could go into AFib at any moment. You know what? I'm just going to fucking hammer down and push the gas harder.
So I'm going to tell you a little story, like, for local people who probably don't know. There's this kid that I rode with. We were actually racing together back in. So this is like a Category 3 USA cycling level. There's 5, 4, 3, 2, 1, and one is and then pro, right? So he was at a 3, and he's like 16 years old, 17 years old, something like that. We're racing in the same race together. It was the first road race of the season. It was the Jefferson Cup down in Charlottesville. As a Category 3, racing with the 1, 2s, and 3s, this kid wins that race. And after that, another guy on my team who was a pro who had connections with Lance Armstrong gave him a call and said, "Hey, you should look at this kid."
Right.
So Lance and Bart Naggs, these guys, they look at this kid, and the first question is, test him. Like, what's his VO2 max? That's the question, right? Because, like, these elite cyclists, you're not going to make it unless your natural level is, like, up there. It's got to be like 70s-ish, 75, something like that. So this kid was up there, right? And he gets pulled onto Trek Livestrong's cycling team, which is a junior development program for USA Cycling. He enters the U23 Giro d'Italia, which is the Tour de France in Italy, and wins it, the Giro d'Italia. This kid's from Warrenton, Virginia, right?
So he's just a machine.
Yeah, and so he wins that race. He gets recruited onto Team Sky.
Wow.
Right? So anyway, I loved following this kid's career. He's now at the end of his career. He's won several stages in the real Giro d'Italia. Never was the overall GC contender, but got in the top 10. So I would say kind of his results in his pro career were sort of
mixed,
good, but not like
elite,
great, not like, the greatest. But I mean, this kid's local, professional cyclist, probably nobody knows him. His name's Joe Dombrowski. There's a nice article on him in the Washington Post. But anyway, that kid was a kid that I was training with. Right?
So 174 beats per minute is due to him.
And Chris Hayes and Jared Nieders and these guys, like Chris Hayes was anyway, those are the guys. Those are my friends. So those
are the guys that are pushing, right. And this is why you can't talk going up a hill.
Right. And and the list goes on. But yeah, it's been really fun. And that's what I do for a hobby. Like, that's my hobby is fitness. So I really enjoy
fitness,
on the bike.
So just on the bike?
Mostly on the bike, but I would say, like, right now it's wrestling practice, right? So just wrestling live in the room is, we don't have time for much else when you look at it. You do. You somehow make time.
I mean, I just lift in the morning, so I just make it a point to try to get up at like 5:30, maybe 6 on a late day, eat my breakfast, get in. I get my lift in about an hour in the morning before work, take my shower, come to work, and then basically I work. I come home. Yeah. I eat, and like we're off to practice.
Yeah.
And it's just rinse, repeat, repeat.
Yeah.
But I mean, Liam, I got Liam. Liam is wrestling and lifting. He's still lifting 3 days a week.
Yeah.
That's great. Trying to stay on top of it.
It's making a difference, really.
I mean, I think like when we went to Ironman, the one thing that I thought was interesting is one of the dads came up to me and was like, "Hey, is Liam still lifting? And like, are you still doing the programming?" I'm like, "Yeah." He's like, "Yeah, we should all probably get back on that," because I think it was apparent that like we were getting pushed around the mat pretty good.
Right.
And Liam was one of the only kids that was kind of pushing back and being like, "Okay, like."
Yeah.
You want to go physical? We can wrestle physical. Like this doesn't make me uncomfortable. Yeah. And he was, even wrestling probably a little heavier than he will be for maybe the remainder of the year. Like, he was just sort of wrestling where he naturally sat. And even after that, he was like, Dad, if I just cut like 2 pounds, I'm like right in it with these kids, and probably a little on the bigger side at that weight class. So I think that's what we're going to do.
Yeah.
Sort of for the remainder of the year. But yeah, I mean, we're trying to get our lifts in.
It's an important part of it. You know, it really is. And I don't think everybody appreciates just how important that lifting is.
100%.
Yeah.
And I think a lot of parents and even coaches, like I'll talk to other coaches in other programs, they're still hung up on like 1980 technology of like, oh, we don't want to damage growth plates, and, you know, lifting is unhealthy when they're in middle school. And I'm like, no. There's not actually data that supports you. Like, you're just like repeating these stereotypes of like, oh, we don't want to damage. Healthy lifting with good technique is actually really beneficial to kids. Like, it's good for their bone structure. It actually shows that it increases bone density in kids. Like, these are all good things. It's not going to stunt your growth. It's not going to, you know, hurt their growth plates in any way, shape, or form. And it's explosive. And I think, you know, if I had one thing that I would tell any parent in my room is to get your kid Olympic lifting like stat.
Yeah.
For all of those people that are like, Olympic lifting is too complicated to teach your kid. Well, we're wrestlers. Like, we literally teach technique.
Yeah.
Like, if your wrestler can't comprehend and learn Olympic lifting, then maybe he's not a good wrestler, because I assure you the techniques that we do in the wrestling room are far more complicated than the weightlifting techniques that they need to learn on a very basic level to get stronger.
Yep. Well, I agree. You know, my strength coach in college was an Olympic. He certified us in Olympic weightlifting. That was kind of one of the things that we did as part of the wrestling program.
Yeah, it amazes
Jeff
me.
Connors was his name. Yeah.
Amazes me
Still doing it.
the amount of
I think
kids.
he's an AD now.
Really?
Yeah. Anyway.
So yeah, amazes me the amount of kids that just that don't do it, and the parents that are just like, we don't have time for that. I'm like, you don't have time for like getting your kid a basic weight set?
Yeah.
Or like, I mean,
we didn't. So it was fun. Like when we went home in the off season, all of the top guys in our room were hitting the weights hard, and then they'd come back in the fall after the summer of lifting. It's like everybody was jacked.
right? Like, 'cause
Coming
they got
back
to
into
eat
the room,
and
right?
just
Yeah.
lift.
Just eat and lift. Yeah, Marchetti, like he would come back jacked. All those guys. So
Yeah. So, anyways, well,
Yeah.
I know you got to get back to it. I really appreciate having you, and I really appreciate you taking the time.
That was
to
fun.
Come in and
I
tell
love
us
your setup
story.
here. This is awesome.
Yeah, we'll have to have you back.
I'm honored to be number one here. This is cool.
Thanks, Brian.